All right, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. My name is Megan Lambert, MEGAN LAMBERT. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the legal director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Oklahoma. And before we start to talk about the reason we are here today, I want to acknowledge the moment that we are in today with the United States Supreme Court's Dobbs decision coming down today and rejecting reproductive freedom and body autonomy. While we see attacks on civil liberties from all fronts, we are joined together today to continue the good fight. And today I have the great honor to be joined by some of Oklahoma's fiercest advocates for justice and social change, and by our partners at the Cornell Law First Amendment Clinic and the National Center for Law and Economic Justice. And today we come together to protect the rights of protesters. In the wake of George Floyd's murder by Minneapolis police, people from across the country took to the streets to stand up for Black lives and demand police accountability. In Oklahoma, those demands were met with tear gas, with pepper spray, and felony criminal charges. The Oklahoma legislature passed anti-protest laws. The City of Oklahoma City Police Department harassed and arrested protesters exercising their First Amendment rights. And the Oklahoma County District Attorney weaponized the Oklahoma riot statute to charge protesters with felonies without probable cause. Today, we stand together to file 2 civil rights lawsuits against Oklahoma officials for their unconstitutional response to demands for justice. We will provide time at the end for questions for both legal teams. However, plaintiffs will not be answering questions today. And now I would like to turn it over to Ranit with the National Center for Law and Economic Justice to talk more about the case against Oklahoma City. Ranit?
Hi, I'm Ranit Patel, R-A-N-I-T, Patel, P-A-T-E-L. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a staff attorney with the National Center for Law and Economic Justice. Oklahoma City is targeting and punishing activists simply for speaking out against racial justice. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, people across the country took to the streets to call for change. Police everywhere responded with attempts to suppress those voices. In Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma Police Department and the Oklahoma County District Attorney David Prater worked together and conspired to retaliate against our clients, the plaintiffs in this case, with intimidation and felony arrest and prosecution for incitement to riot, all because they chose to speak out against the Oklahoma City Police's dangerous and predatory policing. The ACLU of Oklahoma, the National Center for Law and Economic Justice, and Herbert Smith Freehills filed a lawsuit today on behalf of our 6 plaintiffs here with us today: Sincere Terry, Preston Neighbors, Mia Hodgset, Trevor Webb, Austin Mack, and Tyreek Baker. These plaintiffs were young leaders motivated to voice their anger and sadness after George Floyd's murder, recognizing that Oklahoma City's police were complicit in similar racist violence. They were out protesting every single night from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. From 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for the month of June. In late June 2020, our clients planned to join activists across the country in painting a mural, proclaiming that Black Lives Matter outside of Oklahoma City's police headquarters. They organized a community event with music and pizza. Families gathered and danced. But in the afternoon, a police officer tried to drive past the barricades, disturbing the fun, enjoyable atmosphere that our plaintiffs had created. Our clients called on him to back away, upset that he was intruding on their space. The next day, some of our clients went to the police headquarters to complain about that officer. But instead of being allowed to complain, they were arrested for disorderly conduct. A week later, they were charged with incitement to riot. The Oklahoma City Police Department sent U.S. Marshals to raid their homes. and their lives changed forever. These young leaders have been censored. They are now cautious and restrict their protesting of the Oklahoma City Police Department, terrified of retaliation. We filed this case against Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County District Attorney David Prater for their policies and practices of violating the constitutional rights of these protesters. Violations include excessive force, surveillance, harassment, and criminal charges brought without probable cause. Defendants' practices geared towards silencing protesters like our plaintiffs, who are critical of the Oklahoma City Police Department and fight for racial justice, exemplify the very racism that they went out to fight against. It is time for Oklahoma City and DA Prater to stop their retaliation against racial justice protesters critical of them and to start investing in Oklahoma City's communities. I'm going to now turn and hand the mic over to Jared Carter from Cornell Law School's First Amendment Clinic.
Great, thank you. My name is Jared Carter, Jared Carter, and I'm an attorney and associate director of the Cornell Law School First Amendment Clinic. More than a century ago, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Brandeis so eloquently wrote that the founders, for all their flaws, valued liberty both as an end and as a means. He went on to say they believed liberty to be the secret of happiness and courage to be the secret of liberty. These 6 Oklahomans, the plaintiffs, our clients, had the courage of their convictions. They stood up and made their voices heard, and this is the courage that Brandeis was talking about. This is the courage that the First Amendment contemplates. Now, Justice Brandeis didn't end there. He went on to say that the framers of the Constitution, quote, believed that the freedom to think as you will and speak as you think are means indispensable to the discovery and spread of political truth. That without free speech and assembly, discussion would be futile. That public discussion is a political duty, and that this, he said, should be a fundamental principle of American government. These 6 Oklahomans took that principle to heart. They assembled and engaged in a public discussion as a political duty. And we should, whether one disagrees with them or not, stand firmly today on the side of liberty. And that means standing firmly on the side of the First Amendment as a fundamental principle of American government. And this fundamental principle of American government, as Brandeis called it, was clearly not the principle that was employed by those charged with the sacred task of enforcing the law in Oklahoma. Instead, these 6 courageous Oklahomans who stood up to add their hearts, souls, and voices to the public discussions about systemic racism in this country were systematically targeted and charged under a law that sweeps so broadly, it criminalizes speech and conduct protected by the First Amendment. That is the Oklahoma riot statute, and it is rotten to its core. It criminalizes speech and expressive conduct that goes far beyond the limited exceptions to the First Amendment. The Oklahoma riot statute at issue here prohibits speech which the government cannot regulate, speech protected by the First Amendment. And the First Amendment says unequivocally that in the United States of America, governments shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It's only a few short words, but those words have carried us forward and led to much progress in our history as a nation. So while litigation may often be, rightfully so, the last resort, the Constitution recognizes that often the only way to enforce these noble principles of liberty is through the courts. We're here today to do just that. And I thank you very much for being here, and would like to turn it over now to 2 plaintiffs in this matter, Mr. Austin Mack, who is a racial justice advocate, and our lead plaintiff, Sincere Terry, who has also been a leader advocating in Oklahoma for racial justice. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Austin.
Hi, you guys. I'm Austin Mack, AUSTIN MACK. Hi, my name is Austin Mack. I'd like to express the injustice times that I've been through as a member of the Black community and as well as a member of Black Lives Matter. First off, I've been belittled in my fight for my people, not only once, but many times that I can't even count on 2 hands and 2 feet, dealing with my fight with injustice, hatred towards Black people. It's very sad that this is the world that we live in, but also very humbling at times. When I look back at how it all started from going to Minneapolis, Minnesota to fight and protest from Minneapolis to fighting and protesting for Julius Jones's release. At times I go into deep thought about what I've been through, and it's very traumatizing as a young Black man. For me to have to experience some of the disgusting situations at times, fearing for my life, as well as my name being slandered all over the news like I was some criminal that I'm not. I often ask myself, is it so hard to expect to be treated like an equal member of society and not only fear for my life because of the color of my skin, not by the content of my character, as Dr. King would say. I'm just trying to fight the good fight, you know? And with that, I'll turn it over to Sincere.
Hello, my name is Sincere Terry, SINCERETERRY. I am a 20-year-old activist in the state of Oklahoma. I was born and raised in Oklahoma County. I started protesting at the age of 12 and knew that America did not offer equality. In the summer of May 2020, my activist journey kicked off, and I knew I was dedicated to this movement. After watching the video of George Floyd being murdered, it made me outraged. The fact that Black citizens' lives don't matter to America is sickening. It made me want to be a part of the change and enforce that change by holding all government officials accountable for their actions. The first few nights attending protests, I saw citizens get ran over, officers speed through crowds with their sirens and lights just to turn them off, and a herd community come together pleading for justice. But instead, we were met with triple the force by Oklahoma City Police Department. They used tear gas and beanbag rounds to stop us from standing up for our rights. Once Oklahoma City Police Department and David Prater realized that we weren't going to stop fighting for a change, they tried silencing us with outstanding charges and bonds that were $200,000 plus. They knew that normal citizens like us couldn't afford this bond, and they sent U.S. Marshals after us and to our loved ones. After being incarcerated, my life changed forever. I became a forever target to the state of Oklahoma for standing up. Oklahoma snatched my final teenage and early 20s away from me. I have to continuously watch what I do for the past 2 years, scared that I would be charged and taken back into custody. But today, I'm finally putting my foot down and ready to fight this fight all the way with my wonderful plaintiffs and strong group of attorneys. And I'll be passing it back over.
Thank you. And we are now available to answer any questions. Cassidy, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Want to make sure that I'm not missing any before we close.
There are a couple questions in the Q&A, if you want to look at those.
I'm seeing the question, has there been any response from defendants? Not yet, though that is very typical. We are still in the process of serving them, so we expect a response in the coming weeks.
If you have any additional questions, you can type them in the chat. And we'll wait a couple more minutes for people to get any questions in.
All right, I saw 2 additional questions. Unfortunately, our plaintiffs are not available to answer questions at this time, but we can make them available at a later date. The second question, or the next question in there, how long have the lawsuits been in the works? Since we saw the unconstitutional reactions of Oklahoma in 2020. We got to work trying to figure out what was the most effective way we could ensure that the unconstitutional reaction to demands for justice that our clients and others faced would never happen again, regardless of the intent of anyone in any given office, to make sure that the tools used to violate our clients' constitutional rights no longer existed. And so it's been since the summer of 2020. Jared, Renee, anything that you would like to add to that?
No, not right now. Except I will say that NCLAJ is very grateful to be working with Oklahoma ACLU on this.
There was one more question that came into the Q&A, Megan.
Yeah, so the question was about the goal of the state case challenging the definition of riot against the Attorney General's office and the DA. And essentially, yes, the goal is to have a federal court declare that the definition of riot is unconstitutional and to prevent the Attorney General and the District Attorney from enforcing that unconstitutional definition against anyone. And because the entirety of Oklahoma's riot statute relies upon that unconstitutional definition, yes, the goal is to rid Oklahoma statutes of unconstitutionally vague and overbroad criminal charges. And in this case, that would mean the entirety of Oklahoma's riot statute. Jared, anything that you would like to add?
No, nothing beyond that, Megan. Thank you, though.
I do want to quickly address the question that was posed to our plaintiffs. While they are not answering questions, I do want to make clear that both cases describe the fact that all of our plaintiffs have continued protesting and anticipate and plan on continuing to protest. However, their experiences have caused them to protest in fundamentally different ways. And so, yes, they do plan on continuing protesting. In fact, they have been protesting since. However, both complaints outline in great detail how folks show up differently when faced with systematic harassment and unconstitutional felony charges. Excellent. Well, if there are no additional questions, I think we can close it out. And I just want to thank everyone who joined us this afternoon, and to thank our partners with Cornell and the NCLEJ. And most importantly, thank all of our courageous plaintiffs for standing up for yourselves and for your community, both in the summer of 2020 and since. And again today, as we stand together to protect the First Amendment and protest rights. Thank you all so much.